A West African emperor may have crossed the ocean centuries before Columbus. He stared out over the Atlantic horizon, dreaming of the lands that lay beyond. And one day he assembled the largest fleet in history to go and find them. This is the incredible story of Mali's voyage to the Americas. Or was it? At its height in the early 1300s, the Mali Empire was arguably the richest and most powerful state in the world. Its wealth came largely from controlling the trade routes across the Sahara Desert, where merchants exchanged gold for salt and then carried both back to the Mediterranean cities hungry for both commodities. In between these great trading hubs were many smaller cities, each home to thousands of scholars who helped make Mali the intellectual center of the Islamic world. But it wasn't just mosques and minarets that flourished in Mali. The empire's rulers also supported astronomers, mathematicians, and most importantly, geographers, all of whom dreamed of expanding their knowledge beyond the known world. They wanted to know what lay to the west of their empire and beyond the great ocean that separated them from the setting sun. What if Africa crossed first? We are about to dive into one of history's biggest mysteries, one that has been lost to centuries of European-centered history books. But fortunately, we can discover it through chronicles written by scribes in Cairo and chroniclers in Mali. There are even oral histories still remembered in modern-day Ghana that tell the tale of this great voyage. After decades of preparation, the Mali fleet set sail on a mission to discover new lands. Leading them was a man obsessed with the sea, the Mali Emperor Abubakari II. From the time he was a young prince, Abubakari had shown an interest in the ocean, poring over maps and charts, trying to learn everything he could about navigation and shipbuilding. When he became emperor, he put this knowledge to use, building harbors, training sailors, and commissioning ships unlike any seen in Africa before. One historian described it as an armada. Another said it was a fleet that had never been assembled by any king. As the fleet prepared to set sail, anticipation ran high throughout the empire. The people of Mali had never seen anything like it. Hundreds of ships were loaded with men and supplies enough to sustain them for months at sea. There were elephants and horses, gold and silver. Food included dried fish, dates, and grains, along with plenty of water to keep everyone hydrated on the long journey. Each vessel was equipped with a compass, astrolabe and quadrant, tools used to navigate by the stars. Experienced pilots steered the ships while others paddled. Some sources say there were oarsmen aboard, too, though their role is less clear. It seems likely they were used to help maneuver the ships when they were close to shore or in calm waters. But why did Abubakari want to send this fleet so far out into the unknown? What was he hoping to find? He was motivated by a desire to push the boundaries of the known world, to see what lay beyond the horizon. The Mali emperors had a long tradition of sending out explorers to chart the unknown, and Abubakari was no different. He sent expeditions into the Sahara Desert to the south, into the jungles of West Africa, and across the Atlantic Ocean to the west. It was this last expedition that would become the stuff of legend. Now let's take a moment to look at what the evidence tells us. First, let's examine the chronicles themselves. They are our primary source of information about the voyage, and they tell an incredible tale. Here's an excerpt from the book The Travels of the World's Description by Al-Amari, written in Cairo in 1344, describing the Malians crossing the ocean. And what I read to you is from chapter 289. On the day of departure, a large fleet of ships, probably more than 200, laden with men and merchandise set sail. Among the goods carried were bales of cotton, bales of wool, silk, damask, brocade, carpets, copper, iron, tin, lead, coral, ivory, rhinoceros horn, amber, and musk. Every day the ships would go out for about 3 miles and then return to replenish their stock of provisions. Then they would go out again until they disappeared from view. 3 days later, the fleet anchored in port and disembarked its passengers. Everyone agreed that the land they had reached was Mogadiscio because they saw palm trees, bananas, cotton trees, and other African plants. Many of those who landed there returned to the ships and sailed back to Mali, bringing with them samples of the plants growing on the island and news of their discovery. According to these accounts, the Malians sailed for 3 days before reaching land, which would have brought them to the shores of South America. They would have seen Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, or maybe even the tip of Chile. These chronicles are the earliest written account of anyone reaching the Americas predating Christopher Columbus by over a century. What's more, the details in the story are incredibly precise, making it seem all the more real. We can picture the ships setting sail from the coast of West Africa, traveling for weeks on end until they finally spot land on the horizon. We can see the explorers landing and collecting samples of plants and animals to take back to Mali. We can hear the excitement in their voices as they tell their fellow citizens about their incredible journey. The chronicles don't stop there, though. They also tell us what happened next. According to Alomar, the Malians decided to establish a settlement on the mainland. They built homes for the people who had come with them and appointed a governor to oversee the colony. Then they returned to Mali, where they shared their experiences with the rest of the empire. Unfortunately, we don't know much about what happened to the settlement or to the people who stayed behind. Did they eventually become part of the local population? Did they return to Mali? Or did they perish in the New World? We may never know the answers to these questions. But what we do know is that the Malians were the first to reach the Americas, having done so almost 100 years before Christopher Columbus. So why don't we know about this amazing discovery? Well, it's because the European powers actively worked to erase it from history. For starters, they didn't want people to know that a non-European had discovered the Americas first. That would have undermined their claims of superiority. Additionally, they wanted to make sure that no one else would try to claim the Americas for themselves. If word got out that another empire had already done so, then why would anyone want to risk their lives crossing the Atlantic? Finally, they were afraid that the Malians might try to conquer the Americas. If that happened, then who knows what else might follow. So the European powers kept the discovery a secret, hoping that no one would ever find out. But now you know the truth. Thanks to newly declassified documents, we can learn what really happened in Mali after Abubakari left on his voyage. When he stepped down as emperor, he was succeeded by his brother, Mansa Musa, who went on to become one of the most powerful rulers in African history. Under Mansa's rule, Mali reached its golden age, becoming the largest empire in the world. During his reign, Mali grew to include much of modern-day West Africa, as well as parts of North Africa and the Middle East. He also expanded trade along the Trans-Saharan route and into the Mediterranean Sea. In addition to being a great ruler, Mansa was also a devout Muslim who worked to spread Islam throughout his empire. He built mosques and schools, and he sent missionaries to convert people to the new faith. Mansa's efforts were so successful that by the end of his reign, Mali was known as the land of the two Qiblas, referring to its location between the two holy cities of Mecca and Medina. One reason for Mali's success during Mansa's rule was the introduction of accounting rules, which helped ensure that taxes were collected fairly and that the empire's vast wealth was managed properly. Mansa also implemented policies to promote peace and stability throughout his empire. He established a professional army to protect Mali's borders, and he created a system of courts to settle disputes between subjects. Mansa's reign marked the peak of Mali's power and prosperity. When he died in 1337, his empire stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean, and under his rule, Mali had become the wealthiest kingdom in the world. Recently, historians have started to study the possibility of Mansa's great-uncle, Abubakari II, reaching the Americas. They've examined the old chronicles and found that they contain clues about the voyage. For example, one passage mentions that the fleet traveled for 3 days before reaching land. If this is true, then it means that the Malians must have traveled at least 3,000 miles, which is the approximate distance from the coast of West Africa to the coast of South America. Historians have also studied oral histories from the region that tell the story of a great voyage across the ocean. These histories were passed down for generations before being written down by scholars, and they contain many of the same details as the chronicles. For example, both accounts mention that the fleet consisted of hundreds of ships and that it took 3 days to reach the Americas. But what's most interesting is that historians have been able to trace the path of the fleet using modern-day technology. By studying ocean currents and wind patterns, they've been able to determine exactly where the fleet would have gone once it left the coast of Africa. And what they found is astonishing. According to their calculations, the fleet would have traveled along the Canary Current, which flows westward from Africa towards the Americas. This current would have carried the fleet across the Atlantic in just 3 days, which would explain why the chronicles say that it took the Malians so little time to reach the Americas. Historians have also been able to track the path of the fleet using satellite imagery. They have looked at pictures of the ocean surface and cloud formations to see if they can find any evidence of the fleet's journey. So far, they haven't found anything definitive, but they haven't given up hope yet. Other historians, however, are more skeptical. They argue that the chronicles are full of errors and that the story of the voyage is nothing but fiction. They also point to the lack of archaeological evidence to support the story. After all, if the Malians had really reached the Americas, then shouldn't we have found some artifacts or ruins that prove it? Well, not necessarily. Just because we haven't found any evidence of the voyage doesn't mean it didn't happen. It is possible that the fleet arrived in South America and explored the continent for some time before disappearing, perhaps due to natural disasters or disease. Or maybe the fleet turned back after reaching the Americas and the story of the voyage was lost to history. Either way, the evidence is clear that the Malians had the capability of crossing the Atlantic Ocean and exploring the Americas. Whether they actually did so remains an open question, but one that should be asked more often. Christopher Columbus is a name synonymous with the discovery of the Americas. He's been celebrated in statues and paintings, stamps and coins. But what if we told you that Columbus wasn't the first to reach the Americas? What if there was someone else who beat him there by nearly a century? It may sound crazy, but the evidence is mounting that the Malians reached the Americas long before Columbus. And if that's true, then it changes everything we thought we knew about exploration and discovery. We can only imagine what Munsa and his crew saw when they first arrived in the Americas. They would have been greeted by lush rainforests teeming with wildlife, mountains and rivers, and a landscape that was completely alien to them. How did they react when they first set foot on the shores of a new continent? What did they think when they saw the plants and animals they had never seen before? Unfortunately, we can't know the answers to these questions, but we can imagine that their experience was nothing short of amazing. Munsa's voyage to the Americas was truly an epic adventure, one that would make any explorer jealous. His fleet of hundreds of ships carrying thousands of men and supplies across the vast Atlantic Ocean. It takes courage, determination, and an unwavering belief in one's mission to undertake such a journey. Munsa's legacy continues to inspire people today. His story is a reminder that anything is possible if you dare to dream big and work hard to make your dreams a reality. And now you know the truth. Before Columbus, before Vikings, before Polynesians, the Malians set sail across the ocean and made it to the Americas. It's high time we gave them their flowers. Because of Abubakari II and Munsa I, the Mali Empire will forever be known as the empire that crossed first. Subscribe to History Rewritten and never miss the truths they tried to erase.